I've been on Amtrak's overnight routes enough times that I stopped thinking of them as adventures. They're just part of the job. Pack a bag, grab a window seat, sleep through the dark middle of the country, wake up somewhere new. My coworkers always said I made it sound boring. Maybe I did. Maybe that's why I stopped paying attention. The night it happened, I was on the Capitol Limited out of Chicago. I'd been in the city for a 3-day nursing conference, and my feet were still sore from standing on convention center carpet for 8 hours straight. I'd upgraded to a sleeper roomette because my company's travel policy had finally changed, and I was not going to spend 12 hours folded into a coach seat if I didn't have to. I boarded at Union Station around 9:40 p.m., found my car, found my room, and that was it. I was done for the night. My plan was simple. Change into something comfortable, eat the granola bar I'd stuffed in my bag, and be unconscious before we crossed into Indiana. The attendant for my car was a man named Glenn. He was maybe 60, broad-shouldered, with a gray mustache and the kind of unhurried manner you see in people who've done the same job for 20 years and made peace with it. He showed me how the seat folded into a bed, where the reading light was, where to store my luggage. Standard stuff. I thanked him, and he stepped out and slid the door most of the way shut. I sat on the little bench seat and pulled out my phone. I'd made the mistake of posting a photo from the conference earlier that day. One of those stupid shots of my name badge and the Chicago skyline through the hotel window. Captioned something like, "Heading home tomorrow. Finally." My sister had commented a string of heart emojis. A few colleagues had liked it. Normal. I plugged in my charger and started scrolling, killing time until my body gave up and let me sleep. Glenn came back about 10 minutes later. He didn't knock the way attendants usually do, that light professional tap. He knocked quietly, leaned in close, and spoke low. Not whisper low, but the kind of low that means I don't want the person in the next roomette to hear this. He said, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to switch to a different room tonight. Car 431, room 7. I'll help you move your things." I looked at him. Is something wrong with this one? He didn't answer right away. He looked out into the corridor for just a second, then back at me. "The heat unit's giving us trouble. 7 is identical, same site, same setup. You'll be more comfortable." It was a reasonable explanation. It was also clearly not the real one. I don't know how I knew. I've tried to explain it to people since, and I always come up short. It was something about the way he checked the corridor, something about the way his voice didn't quite match his face. I've worked in emergency medicine long enough to recognize when a person is managing their own anxiety while talking to someone else. Glenn was managing something. I said okay. He carried my rolling bag and I followed him 2 cars forward, room 7. He set my bag down, told me to lock the door, and added, so quietly I almost thought I'd misheard, "Don't open it for anyone tonight unless you call me first." He handed me a small card with a number on it. His cell, not the train's, intercom. "For anything," he said. "Anything at all." Then he left. I stood in the middle of that tiny roomette with my jacket still on and my heart going faster than it had any reason to go. 14 minutes later, I heard the screaming. It came from the direction of my original room. A woman's voice, sharp and sudden, cut off almost immediately. Then something hit something hard, furniture maybe, or a wall, then nothing. The train was still moving. The rhythm of the wheels on the track didn't change. Outside the window, dark fields slid past under a low sky. I sat completely still. Before I tell you everything that happened after that, I want to say something, because this is the part that always gets to me when I think back on it. I'm not someone who panics easily. I've coded patients at 2 in the morning. I've had to tell families things no one should have to hear. I know how to keep my hands steady when my chest is doing something else. But that sound, that single cut-off scream, did something to my nervous system that I still haven't fully recovered from. Because it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like in the movies. It was just real and then immediately gone. And that silence afterward was somehow the worst part. I texted my husband. Something just happened on the train. I heard someone scream. I'm in a different room than I was booked into. Don't panic, but I need you to stay awake. His reply came in under a minute. What do you mean scream? What's going on? I don't know yet. Don't call me. I don't want to make noise. Just stay up. I tried the intercom. A woman answered from somewhere in the train, and I told her I'd heard what sounded like someone in distress in car 433. She said she'd look into it. Her voice was calm, and that made me feel worse, not better. Because calm on the other end of a line, when you're the one who's scared, feels like distance. I called Glenn's number. He picked up on the second ring. I heard something, I said, from my original room. There was a pause that told me everything. Then, stay in room 7. Lock the deadbolt. I'm handling it. What is happening, Glenn? Another pause. There's a situation. The police have been contacted. The train is going to make an unscheduled stop in the next 40 minutes. Until then, please do not open your door. Was someone hurt? He didn't answer that. He said, I'll call you back. And he was gone. I put my phone face down on the seat and pressed both hands flat on my knees. Think. I'm a nurse. I think under pressure, that's the job. What I knew, Glenn had moved me out of my original room before anything happened. He'd known something was coming. He'd given me his personal number. He'd told me to call him before opening the door for anyone. He had known. What I didn't know, how. I sat on the floor, back against the door, because something in me needed to not be visible through the window. The fields outside were completely dark now. No houses, no lights, just moving black. My husband texted again. Nadia, please tell me what's going on. I typed back, train is stopping early. Police involved. I'm locked in a different room and I'm okay. Please just stay on your phone. He called immediately. I answered and kept my voice low and flat. Nurse voice. I told him what I knew and he listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love about him, even when I could hear how scared he was. When I finished, he said, Do you need me to do anything? Just stay on. I'm here. I kept the line open and set the phone on the seat beside me. Knowing he was there helped. Not because he could do anything from 300 miles away, but because if something happened, he'd know. He'd know and he'd act. That mattered. About 20 minutes passed, quiet, the normal sounds of the train, the creak and sway of the car, wheels on track, then footsteps. Not the measured, routine footsteps of a train attendant doing rounds. These were heavier, moving faster, coming from the direction of car 433. They stopped outside my door. A knock, 3 knocks, evenly spaced. Amtrak staff, a man's voice said. We're checking all passengers. Just a routine safety check. Can you open the door, please? I did not move. I did not breathe. My husband, still on the phone, heard it too. He didn't say a word. The voice again, smoother this time. Ma'am, this will just take a second. Something about how he said ma'am made the hair on my arm stand up. There was something wrong with it. Too casual, too easy. Glenn called me ma'am, and it felt respectful. This felt like someone using a word they'd practiced. I stayed quiet. After a moment, the footsteps moved on. I heard a door further down the car, the same knock, the same voice. Then silence again. My husband whispered, Nadia. I heard it, I said. That didn't sound right. No, it didn't. Glenn called me back 7 minutes later. I answered immediately. There's someone in the car who shouldn't be there, he said. No preamble. He boarded with a ticket, but the name on the ticket was flagged when the conductor ran the manifest after I reported the incident. I've got the conductor and one of the off-duty transit officers with me now. We're coming through the car. When you hear me knock 3 short, then 2 open the door. Not before. I said I understood. One more thing, he said, and here his voice dropped even lower. Earlier tonight, before the train departed, a man came to the platform and asked a gate agent which car a passenger named Lauren was in. Gave her description. The agent didn't give him anything, but she reported it. That's why I moved you, your name badge from the conference. It was in your jacket pocket when you boarded and visible when you sat down in your original room. He walked past the corridor twice before I pulled you out. My name badge. I thought about the photo I'd posted that morning. My name badge in frame, clear as anything. He'd known my name. He'd known what I looked like. He'd known which train. I said thank you. Glenn said he'd be there in a few minutes. While I waited, I pulled my bag onto my lap. Not for anything inside it, just to have something solid in my hands. I thought about the woman whose scream I'd heard. I thought about whether she was okay. I thought about how many times I'd traveled alone and posted about it in real time without once thinking that anyone outside my circle of friends was paying attention. The knock came. 3 short, then 2. I opened the door. Glenn was there with a broad man in a dark jacket and a woman in an Amtrak uniform who had the look of someone who'd been in the middle of something else and pivoted fast. They came in quickly, and the woman, whose name I later learned was Officer Deb Santana with the Transit Authority, told me they had the suspect detained in the lower level of the dining car. She needed my account of what I'd heard. I gave it to her. All of it. Dates, times, what Glenn had said, the knock at my door, the voice. Nurse voice the whole way. Detailed, sequential, no editorializing. She took notes and nodded. The woman in your original room, I said when I'd finished. Officer Santana looked at me. She's okay. Shaken and hurt, but she's okay. Shaken and hurt, but she's okay. The conductor got there fast. She's being assessed right now. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. Who is she? We're not releasing that yet. But she's okay. The unscheduled stop was in a small city I'd never heard of in Ohio. I didn't catch the name at first. I was too focused on what was happening inside the train. Local police boarded, and the man in the dining car was walked off the train in handcuffs. I watched it from the corridor window. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 20s. He walked with his head down, and I couldn't see his face clearly in the station lights, but there was nothing remarkable about him. That was somehow the most unsettling part. Officer Santana came back and told me they were running his identification and that he appeared to have a connection to at least one prior incident involving a solo female traveler, though she was careful about how much she said. We'll need your contact information for follow-up, she said. And I gave it to her. Glenn came by a little while after that. He looked tired and older than he had 3 hours ago. How did you know? I asked him. Before anything happened, how did you know to move me? He leaned against the wall of the corridor. The man walked past that car 3 times in 20 minutes, he said. And he slowed down every time he got to your roomette. I've been doing this job for 19 years. People slow down for lots of reasons. The way he slowed down wasn't any of them. He looked at his hands. Last year, I didn't say anything when something felt off. Someone got hurt before we reached Pittsburgh. I decided I wasn't going to let that happen again. I didn't ask him what had happened on that other trip. Something told me he'd already decided how much of it he was going to carry. The train got moving again about an hour later. I sat in room 7 with the door locked and my husband still on the phone, talking about nothing in particular, just keeping the line open. He talked about what the dog had done that afternoon, about the weather at home, about what he was thinking of making for dinner when I got back. I know he was doing it deliberately. He was giving me something ordinary to hold on to, and it worked. I slept for a few hours. Not well, but enough. The next few weeks were harder than I expected. I thought I'd be fine. I've handled worse professionally. I've sat with families while the worst thing in their lives was happening and kept myself together. I told myself this was not that. I was safe. Nothing had happened to me, not directly, but my body didn't get that memo. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning convinced I'd heard a knock. I'd freeze in parking garages, in hotel lobbies, in any corridor that reminded me of that train. My husband didn't press me about it. He just made sure I wasn't alone more than I wanted to be, and he let me talk when I was ready and didn't force it when I wasn't. I filed a formal statement with both Amtrak and the Transit Authority. I was contacted twice more by investigators as the case developed. The man who'd been taken off the train was linked to incidents in 2 other states. I won't go into the details of what investigators shared with me, but it was enough to make clear that what had happened was not random or impulsive. He had picked his targets carefully. He'd used publicly available information to do it: my name badge, my photo, my caption that told anyone who cared to look exactly where I was and when I was leaving. I'm not saying this to make anyone feel stupid. I've said it to myself 100 times since, and I know it doesn't help, but I stopped posting about travel in real time after that. Not just slowed down. Stopped. I still travel for work. I still take overnight trains sometimes, though I'll admit, the first time I boarded one after that, I stood in the car for a full minute before I could make myself sit down. I watch the attendants differently now. I notice who walks past the same door twice. Some people might read that and think I've let fear win. I don't see it that way. I see it as paying attention. I spent years moving through airports and train stations and hotel corridors the way most people do, which is to say completely inside my own head, on my phone, assuming the world was neutral. It usually is, but usually isn't the same as always, and I didn't used to know the difference the way I do now. I went back to the Capital Limited about 6 months later. Different route, different season. I asked at the station whether Glenn still worked that line. The woman at the counter didn't know a Glenn offhand, but she said she'd pass along that someone was asking. I left my name and number. He called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I was on my lunch break, sitting in my car in the hospital parking lot. When I saw the area code, I knew who it was before I even picked up. We talked for about 20 minutes. He'd taken some time off after the incident and had just come back. He asked how I was doing, and I told him honestly. Better, mostly, still working on the rest. He said that was about right. Before we hung up, I told him that I thought about what he'd done a lot. That moving me out of that room, trusting his own read of something that could have been nothing, taking the risk of being wrong. That was not a small thing. Most people don't do that. Most people decide it's not their problem. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I've got grandkids now. 2 of them. I think about them when I'm on the train. I think about what kind of world I want them moving around in." He paused. Doing the right thing doesn't usually cost as much as people think it does. It's mostly just deciding to. I've thought about that a lot since. I still travel for work. I still book sleeper cars on long routes, though now I always carry a small door alarm that slides under the handle. $12 on Amazon, worth every cent. I don't post about where I'm going until I'm already back. My name badge goes in my bag the second I'm off the conference floor. Small things. Habits. The kind you build after the world shows you a version of itself you didn't know was there. My husband still teases me about the door alarm. He says I travel like a spy now. I tell him that's not the worst thing a person could say about me. Every time I pack for a trip, I think about Glenn. About the 19 years he spent on that train learning how to read people, and about the 1 year it took him to learn that doing nothing was its own kind of choice. I think about the woman who was in my original room, whose name I still don't know, who was hurt that night before anyone got to her. I think about how close the margin was. One attendant who'd learned his lesson. One decision to say something. I shared this story because I know there are other people who travel the way I used to. Head down, phone out, trusting the world to be as neutral as it usually is. And most of the time it is. But the one time it isn't, you want to have been paying attention. If any of this stays with you, let it be that. Not fear, just attention. If this story meant something to you, subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every story I share exists because someone decided to pay attention and because someone else decided it was worth passing on. I've thought a lot about what would have happened if Glenn had decided it wasn't his job. That's the part that sits with me most. Not the fear, not the man in handcuffs walking off the train in Ohio. Those things I can process. What I can't stop turning over is the simple fact that one person made a choice to act on something he couldn't fully prove, at the risk of being wrong and looking foolish, and that choice is the only reason I'm here telling this story instead of being part of a very different one. He didn't have authority to detain anyone. He didn't have certainty. He had 19 years of paying attention and one bad memory he decided never to repeat. That was enough. I think about the year before, the trip he mentioned, the person who got hurt before Pittsburgh. He didn't give me details and I didn't ask. But I understood what he was saying. He'd seen something and weighed the cost of speaking up against the cost of being wrong, and he'd chosen silence. And then he'd had to live with what came after. A lot of people would make that same calculation and reach the same answer. The math feels safe. What if I'm mistaken? What if I cause a scene? What if it's nothing? The problem is that the math is wrong, because doing nothing is also a choice, and it carries its own consequences. And those consequences fall on someone else. What I've come to understand is that wisdom isn't really about knowing more than other people. It's about being willing to act on what you already know. Glenn knew something was off. I knew something was off the second he knocked on my door and his voice didn't match his face. We both had the information. The difference between that night going one way or another was whether we trusted it. I didn't at first. I told myself the heat unit explanation was reasonable. I was tired. I wanted things to be fine. That's the most human thing in the world. Wanting the world to cooperate with your need for it to be okay. But wanting something to be safe doesn't make it safe. And I've had to sit with the fact that if Glenn hadn't moved me before I had a chance to ignore my own instincts, I might have stayed in that room and rationalized my way right into a nightmare. There's a kind of courage that doesn't look like courage from the outside. Glenn didn't do anything dramatic. He knocked on a door, carried a bag 2 cars forward, and handed me a card with his number on it. Quiet things, small things. But they required him to trust his own read of a situation over the easier option of minding his business. And that's harder than it sounds when you've been wrong before and paid for it. I don't travel the same way anymore, not because I'm afraid, though I'd be lying if I said that night left no mark, but because I've made a different agreement with myself about what paying attention actually means. It means looking up. It means noticing when something is slightly off and not immediately explaining it away. It means understanding that the discomfort of being wrong about a stranger is a far smaller price than the alternative. My husband still laughs about the door alarm. I let him. Some lessons are worth every dollar and every joke at your expense, and this one cost me almost nothing compared to what it could have.